What's up, everybody? Welcome back into a new episode of Windy City Gridiron Radio. With you, as always, your host, Robert Zaglinski, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Pro Football Weekly's Arthur Arkush, where we're going to break down orange jerseys. We're going to get into a lot of fun of the optics of the Bears. Arthur, what's up?
Hey, thanks for having me. How are you doing today?
Just hitting. I'm getting that like 5 o'clock feeling, that 5 o'clock rush feeling of a busy day, and then. But you've brightened my day by joining me, Arthur. I'll say that it's good.
That's very flattering. Thank you. I've got that 5 o'clock feeling too, but I was the one who set the time. So thanks for being flexible. This is podcast number 3 of the day, so I'm sure it'll be the best one.
Podcast number 3, perfect. I would hope so. Let's jump right into it. So the owners' meetings took place over the past over the weekend and over the past few days. People were discussing what we could learn about Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace and the direction the Bears were going overall as an organization. There's a lot of takeaways based on what they revealed. I wanted to open up with what Matt Nagy discussed with Trey Burton. So he described him as the U tight end. So in that respect, that will make Adam Shaheen the Y. We'll get to Shaheen in a second. And he kind of made him seem like the number one receiver or the number one tight end, the guy that's going to get more playing time than a former second-round pick in Shaheen. How do you think Burton's going to fit in this offense, Arthur?
Yeah, I mean, he better fit great. They gave him $18 million guaranteed. He's now paid like a top 10 tight end in the NFL, despite the fact he's never been a starter. No, it's not the University of Miami, but as you mentioned, it's kind of the move position, and they have a little bit different terminology Matt Nagy does that he's bringing to Chicago. So long story short, he kind of likened him or his role to what Travis Kelce did last year. Now, that's obviously big expectations. Leap. Yeah, exactly. It's a big leap, but that's kind of what's fascinating about this whole free agent class is there's a lot of projecting involved, and I don't think you likely make some of these decisions if you're Ryan Pace unless you have the utmost confidence that you've cleaned up schematically and kind of just visionary wise what you want in the offense now that Nagy's on board. So look, he's going to bring speed to the equation and he's going to bring some flexibility. If you're going to be the U tight end or the move tight end, that means you're going to line up all over the formation. Sometimes you'll be in the backfield, you'll be in a wing alignment, sometimes you'll be in the slot, you'll be flexed out wide. So it means versatility, and it means bringing some mismatch potential into the offense. And I know that's what Matt Nagy's all about.
What this is really interesting for me was where this leaves Shaheen, and then with the interesting roster decision for the Bears to retain Deion Sims. So, I mean, where does this leave? As I mentioned, a former second-round pick, a guy that I would have thought that the Bears had confidence in as a guy to be the number one. I understand that he'll be the Y, but it's not as if the previous staff was most confident in him as a blocker. Not that we should take everything that John Fox and Dowell Loggins, given the struggle that the Bears went through in 2017, as gospel, but it's weird to me that they might use a free agent acquisition more than a guy that, to me, a second-round pick is a pretty high investment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you, but let's be clear here. He's actually right now, Robert, he's the backup Y. That's Deion Sims, who's going to be
exactly.
Yeah, the Y is the inline tight end, and right now Sims is the starter, Shaheen is the backup. So I like the Pace. I don't think there's any acknowledgement that he blew the pick or anything like that. It's way too early for that, but we need to remind everyone that Adam Shaheen came from Ashland University, that playing the tight end position in the NFL is a big jump for anyone, much less someone coming from a lower level of competition. And they're comfortable with Deion Sims' blocking ability. They may not be there yet for Shaheen. So I think that ultimately there's going to be a role for all 3 of these guys in the offense. But look, this might surprise a lot of people. Only 2 teams in the NFL have more money tied up in this position than the Bears, Washington and the Patriots. We know that those guys have stars. The Bears don't, but if you kind of follow the money, you have to think. And if you follow the decision to keep Deion Sims on the roster and pass on an opportunity, I think, to save, $5-6 million against the cap, they clearly have a plan for him. And maybe it all means that Shaheen's going to have to maybe sit and wait a little bit longer and watch some guys who have a bit more experience and a bit more defined roles right out of the gate.
Yeah, that would kind of probably set him up more to be a full-time, like, number one contributor in a year or two, more or less. That kind of seems like the path that they're setting up for him, which which for now, I guess, seems okay if they really believe in Burton in that fashion. Let's move over to how the Bears are going to classify their receivers. So obviously, Allen Robinson is a big upgrade. Taylor Gabriel is a playmaker that can take it to the house anytime he touches the ball. But they're not exactly going to have a. They're not going to designate guys on any single play. They're going to have the zebra position, which is what Taylor Gabriel's most of the time going to play, as the slot receiver. And I'm doing air quotes. You can't see that. The split end, the X, the flanker, the Z. How is, you kind of touched on it when we were talking about Burton, but how is the versatility of their personnel now going to help them, as kind of like Nagy discussed?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's big, and I like the idea of not really assigning specific roles for your guys. You mentioned Gabriel as their zebra, which means I think primarily in the slot, but we know Gabriel has played a little bit on the outside too, and we know that in the year 2018 that the most imaginative play callers, I should say, aren't going to pigeonhole their best players into one spot. So I think we've seen some of the game's more dynamic receivers have the ability to line up inside and outside, and I would hope that that's something that's in the works not only for Gabriel, but a guy like Allen Robinson. It's all about creating mismatches, and if you like the way that a big-bodied Robinson can potentially drop inside and create a mismatch on a smaller nickel, then you're going to go ahead and do it. So, I like sort of the flexibility that it potentially creates, and I like it that the way that the Bears have identified wideouts, they already know that some of these guys can play multiple roles. I don't know if people realize it, but some of Cam Meredith's most productive moments 2 years ago were coming out of the slot. And again, I don't know, you may know better than me if Robinson has been asked to do that or was asked to do it at all in Jacksonville, but I just like the idea that this offense isn't going to be rigid. It's everything that the Bears have done since January in replacing John Fox and his staff. They're kind of going for the antithesis of that, and I think that that's very refreshing to Bears fans.
So should there be, before we discuss more owners meeting stuff, should there be real concern as to Meredith coming back and kind of setting back this offense, at least for a year, given that he's still restricted free agent? He hasn't really taken an offer sheet, but that kind of seems like the strategy Pace is employing there, since if we're on these receivers.
Yeah, no, I'm not concerned. I will admit that when I initially saw the tender designations, both for Cam Meredith and Bryce Callahan, but especially Meredith, I sort of scratched my head a little bit, because I thought the Bears, who didn't really need to be trying to save any money against the cap, could just sort of splurge, spend an extra $1 million, and guarantee themselves pretty much that Cam Meredith wasn't going anywhere, because no one's giving up a second rounder for him. I believe he's taken 3 or 4 visits now. He's been in Baltimore, I believe. He's been in Indianapolis, and I think at some point he's supposed to go to New Orleans too, I believe.
That was it.
But no, I think it's probably too soon to worry. It could turn out, I think, likely the worst case scenario. Well, the worst case scenario is that he leaves, but the most likely scenario, if a team does in fact give him an offer sheet, is that the Bears match it, just like they did with Kyle Fuller. And I think that would be the right move, because, and this maybe is a good segue, but Ryan Pace talked about the importance of keeping his own, the homegrown guys, and Cam Meredith has been one of Ryan Pace's biggest success stories so far.
Ryan, I was going to use a different segue, but that's actually pretty good. Ryan Pace was interviewed, I believe, yesterday. I shared it, where they talked about continual excitement. Excitement in the building seemed to be his substitute for "we're fired up about it," which is something he's often made fun of for, because he says it so often whenever he speaks publicly. So to me, this kind of speaks to improved optics for the Bears, and I'm wondering as to whether this is because Nagy seems like more of a new school guy, and he's a new coach, and you have a young quarterback, or whether the hype and the excitement should be really genuine, as opposed to just being a fresh change of scenery for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all of the above, and it's funny that you mentioned. I think that Ryan Pace saying he's fired up about it. It's almost like Mike Glennon saying last year, "This is his year."
This is his year.
Yeah, sort of their crutch, but I get it, and I think that to borrow his phrase, that not only Bears fans but the Bears and well, actually, Bears opponents probably shouldn't be fired up about it because it seems like there is a direction here, and that's why I think that the excitement stemming from this offseason is genuine and it's merited. And it goes everywhere from Nagy's refreshing candor in discussing the various wide receiver positions, something we would never get from John Fox or Dowell Loggins. So, no, that doesn't, despite what John Fox might have used to say, no, it's not going to create a competitive advantage or disadvantage one way or the other. But it's nice. I think it's encouraging for the fans. And then I think what excites me the most as an observer is just watching the way that Pace and Nagy seemingly clicked very early on in terms of their vision for where they want this team to go. And I think that's reflective in some of the moves they've made. It just seems to me like there's a good synergy there because when you're turning this thing around quickly, you have to be able to get on the same page in terms of the players you're looking for and the way that they're going to fit into the certain schemes. And I definitely get the sense that those guys are on the same page. Not to say that the previous regime wasn't. I'm not saying that, but I think it's absolutely vital to be able to pull off one of these off seasons where you're hoping for a real quick transformation. And clearly that's what Bears fans are hoping for and probably should be expecting.
Do you think there was, I don't want to press it too much, but do you think there was a little bit of a disconnect with the previous regime and Pace, with Fox and Pace kind of in some decisions in that respect? Or?
Well, you could look at last year, obviously, with Trubisky and the whole way that they acquired their future franchise QB. And that's where I think the disconnect became apparent, that they were operating on two different timelines. But in the 2 years prior to that, I would say no. I mean, Leonard Floyd looked to me like a Vic Fangio type edge rusher. And, and I think Kevin White, that's not like that was a real controversial pick at the time. And when you look at some of the other kind of, going down the list and stuff like that, Eddie Goldman is a classic nose for what Vic Fangio wants to do. And so I thought they seemed to be on the right page too. But when things really started to depart in two different directions was last year when, John Fox desperately needed to win now. And it seemed anyway like he was going to get very little help from that draft class. That didn't turn out to be the case, but that was certainly the initial reaction.
You mentioned Kevin White, which we'll use this as a nice segue. So Nagy discussed how he's going to do everything possible to give White a chance. He actually went on a nice little refreshing tangent about coaching up players and instilling confidence in them. That was the general paraphrase gist of it. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to be one that's going to, after 3 years where he's had either he hasn't been able to play because of an injury or he's had his seasons cut short because of injuries. I don't know how confident I am, but as the coach, that's something that Nagy has to do. Should we still believe in White? No,
I mean, I'm kind of, I don't want to say the ship has sailed. I think at this point, maybe the most Bears fans should probably hope for realistically with Kevin White is that he can come in and play a full season and contribute. I think anyone who's still hoping that they're going to get that potentially dominant number one wide receiver who dictates coverages and threatens every part of the field, I'm not sure that's realistic at this point. I'm not saying it can't happen, but there just hasn't been enough evidence since, over the past 3 years to think that it's possible. But it was cool to read quotes. I wasn't in Orlando, Hub was there, but we got all the transcripts, and it's neat to hear a line like this one from Matt Nagy. How cool would it be to see this kid come back and be a dominant player? So yeah, he apparently hasn't completely ruled out the possibility, and I do think that putting him in an offense that's sort of Virginia and pairing him with a couple offensive minds and Nagy and Mark Helfrich, whom you really believe have a chance to set him up for success. Certainly those are steps in the right direction, but we all know the first step Kevin White has to take is a couple clean ones without falling and breaking his leg, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw there was a comparison. You kind of bring that up where, he can have a rebound year like Kyle Fuller did in 2017. But to me, that's not applicable because Fuller he's shown that he could play before his breakout year this past season. It wasn't as necessarily consistent as he was this year, but he had been able to stay on the field and showcase some ability. We haven't had any evidence of that from White.
That's apples to oranges to me.
Yeah.
But again, though, I think it's important to stress that. See, I mean, no one knows yet how great of a departure it's going to be from, what Dowell Loggins wanted to do. There were plenty of West Coast principles and even some spread things that he had hoped to incorporate into what he did. But I think that the screens and the quick hitches and digs, the short passes that I expect to see a lot of in this offense that will really suit Kevin White's skill set extremely well, and maybe is kind of the best way to ease him in rather than asking him to be a perfect route runner who knows when to break off routes and what to do at the top of the route and all this on his plate. I think that's going to be in when he has been. And then you can ask him to run 9 routes all day too if you're convinced that he has that speed back that he did years ago that we really haven't seen on an NFL field at all.
Let's jump to Jordan Howard. He was involved in some rumors before free agency, some trade rumors that there was discussions that maybe Matt Nagy isn't as enamored with him, but Nagy strayed away from those accusations or from those thoughts and said that he's going to designate Howard as the primary runner and Cohen will be the guy that's making plays out of the backfield. Of course, the Darren Sproles type for the Bears. But for Howard specifically, do you see him fitting in long-term in Chicago past his rookie deal? Should they be making a play for a more multifaceted workhorse running back, perhaps even in this draft in the mid-rounds?
I don't think so. I know a lot of people have suggested that should be, I don't even want to say a priority, but that should be a target on day 2. And I am all about the day 2 running back. Let me make that clear, and not the round 1 running back. I just, as the years go by, more and more, there's more evidence to me to suggest that you should really kind of sort of hedge your bets there a little bit, and you can do so in other ways. But no, I mean, it's hard with any running back to look past their rookie contract, to be totally honest. But I think that he should fit just fine with what they want to do here. There's going to be a lot of zone blocking, and one of the best assets of Jordan Howard is his vision, and it's his ability to find the cutback. Everyone says he's just an in-between the tackles runner. That's actually not accurate. He's a guy who can kind of plant and go. His limitation is in the passing game, and that's what without saying as much, Nagy kind of specified that, yeah, there's going to be an early down grinder. That'll be Howard, and then you're going to use Cohen throughout the formation as kind of the primary pass-catching back. And I think that's a perfect fit between the two of them. And there's only a handful of guys in the NFL in the year 2018 that can really stay on the field on all 3 downs. Yes, if you have one, that's great. But I don't think there's anything wrong with the dynamic that the Bears have building here too between these two guys, sort of their, whatever, thunder, lightning, smash, dash, whatever you want to call them.
Rumble pack and joystick.
There you go. That one's definitely more creative than either of the 2 cliches I just spurted out. So
you don't think it limits them at all in the respect that maybe if a defense sees Howard in the backfield, that he's going to get the handoff, and that probably plays more into a more diverse passing game, I assume, with the actual playmakers on the outside, right?
Yeah, I just think there's too much. I don't think it's limiting, because I think that the Bears have taken great strides, as we talked about at the top of the show, and bringing in some flexible playmakers elsewhere. And I'd like to see a scenario. I'm not sure if they alluded to this week as a possibility, but why can't you get Howard and Cohen on the same field at the same time?
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, that was pretty rare to see that last year, but I think it would be a great problem to have for the Bears, finding a way to get them both out there. And I just think there's now officially too much other ammunition in this game. And let's not forget, the Bears are looking to install a bunch of RPOs. So if the defense wants to get too sure that one thing's going to happen, that might be the best way for the Bears to attack with those RPOs and sense opportunity there as well.
Yeah, it'll be a nice counter. If there's one offensive need that they still have left, it's probably up front, and particularly on the interior. So Kyle Long hasn't been healthy for the past few seasons. We're not sure what kind of player he's still going to be. When he is healthy, he's on the field, he's still a solid contributor, more than solid contributor. Right. But Nagy didn't exactly endorse what he has up front. The Bears kind of like what they have already, and Arkush and Jordan Morgan is what I'm gauging. But is that something that is the guy that's going to start at left guard on the roster? Is that much of a concern if he isn't? Where they maybe address it with someone like Quentin Nelson?
I don't think it's that big of a concern because I think this is a really good draft to find interior blockers, and the Bears should be in good position to get one if they need it. Quentin Nelson, I think, is sort of the dream pick at 8 for a lot of Bears fans, and I think that makes sense. And I think if he's there, you make that pick without a second's hesitation. But there are going to be other guys, I think, that you might be able to find a little bit later who can also plug and play and turn into pretty solid options. So the question, though, that you mentioned, well, you didn't put it this way, but I guess I will. Okay. How confident are we that the Bears, don't need to find – I'm not saying they need to find 2 starting guards, but it's hard to know what the level of confidence is in Kyle Long's ability to get back on the field and still be that difference maker. So that's why you're correct in saying that the interior of the offensive line has to qualify as the greatest need. If nothing else, they just need to, they need to add up their options and make sure that they have guys that can move around, and they have that in Cody Whitehair, but just they have guys who are going to be able to stabilize this thing a little bit because we've seen it in such a great state of flux over the past couple of years.
I'm going to throw a curveball at you, and this isn't necessarily my opinion, but it's been brought up to me. Mm-hmm. So Mark Helfrich was Hronis Grisu's offensive coordinator or offensive coordinator, head coach in college, whatever else.
Yep.
Would you see Grisu as a kind of guy that maybe can resurrect his career? He's had struggles of late ever since tearing his ACL in I believe it was Family Day on August 2016. Yeah. So would you see Helfrich as being that kind of guy that can unlock Grisu and perhaps move Whitehair to guard, and then you have the dream scenario again of Nelson at left?
It can't hurt Hronis that he has familiarity with the new coordinator coming in, certainly. But I think that's a bit of a stretch just because we've seen some serious limitations. And let me be clear, Grisu is one of my favorite dudes in that locker room. I think he will work as hard as anyone else at it to try and maximize his NFL career. But it's kind of a double-edged sword because it's looking more and more like Grisu's best position in the NFL. It might be center only, and that way you kind of have what some O-line coaches will call bumpers around him. Mm-hmm. It kind of helps them out a little bit, obviously. I think we've seen him get overpowered at guard. It's a small sample size, but we've seen that fairly consistently. So I think center is likely his best outcome, but I might be in the minority here. I hear a lot of people saying that left guard is the ideal spot for Cody Whitehair, actually. And I've just seen too many guys get moved around in recent years by the Bears, and it seems to have an adverse effect. And Kyle Long is one that comes to mind, but you already saw that Cody Whitehair was an all-rookie center, at times looked like a Pro Bowler as a rookie. Last year was a little tougher because he got moved around a little bit more. He did finish strong, but maybe I'm in the minority. I kind of like the idea of plugging in Whitehair at center where we already know he's been successful if you can, and just kind of you set it and forget it. But it will be interesting to see how the new Bears coaching staff attacks that.
I don't think you're in the minority. If anything, I'd rather they just keep him at a spot. So whatever position Harry Heastan and company pick for him this year, just keep him there for the rest of his career or for a set period of time. They were jostling around Kyle Long, and I'm not going to say that's why he got injured, but which it wasn't. But it was more just a comfort, and his level of play dropped. The Kyle Long to tackle things or scenario was always so frustrating to me. Which I guess we'll discuss it more at the end of the show, but would you be opposed to moving Quentin Nelson to tackle if they drafted him, if they saw him that way?
No, I don't know. It's just obviously, who knows? First they have to draft him, first they have to see him that way. So there's obviously a lot of ifs there, but Nelson looks like he might have that type of ability. A lot of people still think Kyle Long, potentially in a perfect world where he was healthy.
The latter is much more of a stretch, yeah.
Yeah, but there's so many wait and sees here. You already know that. Well, we don't know, but the projections to a man suggest that Quentin Nelson is a future Pro Bowler at guard. So I'm not sure I'd want to kind of reinvent the wheel. But here's the beauty of it. Harry Hiestand should know better than anyone, and
Yeah.
that's obviously a great asset. Even if the Bears can't get Quentin Nelson, Bears fans should be so pumped to have Harry Hiestand and to get him to get his hands on the guys that they currently have and to be responsible for finding the best homes for them. And I'm confident that he's going to be able to do that.
I don't want to hyperbolize, but the way this offseason is shaping up, and it's very different to what the Bears have previously done with young quarterbacks they've had. Mm-hmm. So they've surrounded Mitch Trubisky with an offensive staff that has experience, that's innovative. They've given him weapons, a multitude of weapons that he can use, and they're really preparing him and getting ready for actual success for a sustained franchise quarterback. So my question here is for the first time, will it actually be mostly on a Bears quarterback if they don't succeed? Because you can make arguments in the past that there was sometimes they didn't have the ability to play, but where the organization had a factor in not setting them up for that success.
Right. Yeah, sure. I mean, let's be clear here. I think the Bears still want to, have a strong identity of running the football frequently. Mm-hmm. And I think that, the ascent or the growth of quarterbacks in the NFL isn't always linear. So if Mitch Trubisky doesn't win the most improved player in the NFL in 2018 like Jared Goff did this past season, I don't think it necessarily raises red flags. It's not just because Goff did it and just because the Bears seem to sort of be emulating the game plan that both Les Snead and Howie Roseman used out in Philadelphia, it doesn't mean it's going to play out to a T that way in Chicago. But yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, the Bears traded up for Trubisky. Ryan Pace has been talking about Mitch Trubisky like he's already, established franchise guy on the cusp of the Pro Bowl. I don't think it's just me that's kind of been sensing that. Pace is he's been pretty outspoken that Trubisky of him. So, if Pace is talking that way, he's the guy that drafted him. He's the guy that surrounded him. I don't think it's unreasonable for Bears fans to kind of view it similarly.
I found that interesting that you say that. So he doesn't have to be as much of a success as the hype he's getting right now. He doesn't have to be that successful in his second year, in your mind?
No. He needs to take a big step, both statistically, and he needs to lead this Bears team to more wins. Let me be clear about that. Yes, okay. He does need to be successful. I'm just saying, it's no shoo-in that just because Jared Goff won Most Improved Player and went to the Pro Bowl, that it's going to be an absolutely, a spitting image for Mitch Trubisky. But I'd be concerned if he struggles to adapt to this offense and you don't see those stats elevate and you don't see more wins and you don't see this become a more balanced football team immediately this season. Yeah, I think that would be at least a minor cause for concern. But, they say that any quarterback, at least this is the old rule of thumb, that you need like at least 20 plus starts out of an NFL quarterback to really be able to assess. I'm trying to think what Trubisky's at about.
12.
12, yeah. So maybe at the second half of his sophomore season, if we're not seeing the type of progress that we expect, then maybe minor concerns can start creeping in.
Okay, perfect clarification. So as far as picks, I'm going to give you 5 guys. And I want you to make the case for why they'd be an excellent fit or a good fit here with the Bears, and why there are concerns and what you would see as to why they could probably fail or possibly fail. That is. Okay. So Tremaine Edmonds is up first. So why is he a good fit?
Yeah, I mean he's an athletic freak just like Leonard Floyd. He's a size speed prospect just like Leonard Floyd. He would fit a serious. Well, he would project to fit a serious need for the Bears, what I believe is their biggest remaining need, and that's as a pass rusher. But he wasn't asked to do it all that much, obviously, at Virginia Tech. So there is a lot of projecting involved. Maybe that would be in line with what we talked about at the top of the show, how Pace is kind of envisioning how a lot of these offensive playmakers are going to work out, even though we haven't quite seen it consistently yet. But Tremaine Edmonds is 19 years old. He's just pure athleticism wise, he's going to be one of the most exciting players in this draft. So it fits perfectly well with what Ryan Pace has sought in his top 10 picks. And again, I think the belief is that he can fill the exact need that they're looking for too. And then, of course, you have Vic Fangio, and I'll probably bring that up again with every defensive prospect we list here. But there's a reason that a lot of people feel Vic Fangio was actually the best move that Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace had made so far this offseason. It's because he has a long track record of getting the most out of kind of balls of clay, if you will, and that's kind of what Tremaine Edmunds is right now.
Yeah, he's so malleable. So what are concerns as to Edmunds, I imagine, is that he's so raw?
Yeah, I think so, and I think what he's been asked to do primarily in kind of a lot of off the ball responsibilities is what you feel is a pretty good strength, even after getting rid of a Jarrell Freeman. I think Bears fans feel really good about what they have in Danny Trevathan in the middle, and I've seen enough to think that Nick Kwiatkowski is going to be a player too. So I think maybe the concern would be that if you're spending the 8th overall pick, you're hoping to get an immediate difference maker. And if the role that he's most comfortable with currently is one that you already feel is capably filled by 2 other dudes, then you're going to have to get more creative to make sure you can get him on the field.
Quentin Nelson. So he might be, according to some, he's the best overall prospect in this class. Strengths. I don't think there hasn't been a guard that makes as many highlight plays as he does in terms of pancake blocks and finishing to the whistle. He's pretty unique in that respect. So strengths that he would bring as a fit with the Bears.
Well, he's just a nasty guy. I think he's the type of guy that you bring in and he helps you kind of shape the identity that you want to be offensively. And certainly, he should qualify as that, a dude who can move people in the run game, is going to be very steady in protection, both just key traits that you're looking for as you look to develop a young quarterback. Of course, the Harry Hiestand connection. There's a built-in peace of mind in making that pick because you already have the dude, the one guy in the NFL who should know more about Quentin Nelson than anyone else. Well, he would be his position coach. So there's a lot of comfort in that pick. And I think, as you mentioned, there's a very, very strong chance. In fact, I'd say it's a near lock that if he is available at number 8, that he's going to be the top player on Pace's board. And that would mean that you weren't getting too cute. You're playing it like you should. You're taking both the safe and the smart pick. And I don't see a lot of downside with Quentin Nelson at 8 to the Bears.
So I was actually going to. So can you poke any holes in his game? Can you, or as to concerns as to him failing, you're not living up to the hype? Can you actually do that?
Not really, just that he's a guard and that you're spending the 8th overall pick on a guard. But a very quick shameless plug here. Your listeners are really going to want to go to ProFootballWeekly.com today. We've got an awesome story on Quentin Nelson and the history of offensive guards being picked as high as he is being projected. So all your answers are there as well. But yeah, outside of that, that's the only real hole I could poke in it. But I have no problem with it. If you look recently at teams that have pounced very high, and whether it's Brandon Sheriff, I know Zach Martin wasn't quite that high, but a first rounder who has been just an immense success. I think you're seeing some very positives in that regard. I don't think that Quentin Nelson is going to be Jonathan Cooper or Chance Warmack. I think he's going to be Brandon Sheriff or Zach Martin. Awesome.
Okay, so Minkah Fitzpatrick, versatile safety, shameless plug. I wrote about it this week, which we're going to discuss another guy in a second too, breaking down some versatile DBs. I know I've seen your tweets. Not the biggest Adrian Amos fan, and neither am I. So what are the strengths of Fitzpatrick's game? A lot of it's in my article, so go over to Pro Football Weekly and read about that as well. But Arthur, your thoughts?
Yeah, Robert did an awesome job, so I would just echo that. I love the way that you're able to break down the film and help that kind of convey, your evaluation and whatnot. But Adrian Amos is fine. I mean, all things considered, for a 5th-round pick, he's exceeded expectations, and the Bears have gotten awesome mileage out of him. I just don't think he's a difference maker, and I think that would be a great thing to have in a secondary whose biggest shortcomings is, changing games, obviously. So as far as Minkah Fitzpatrick goes, I think there's a decent chance that you could line him up at 3 different spots in your secondary, and he can be a game changer in that regard, whether you're talking about him as a nickel. Some people see him as an outside corner. He's got the length. He's got unusual length for that spot. Not unlike Jalen Ramsey a couple years ago, actually. Not quite as tall, but he's got, I think, similarly long arms, and they're both just physical, tenacious, confident players. So, yeah, I love the versatility that he brings to the table that you outlined so well in your story. And, yeah, I think that would be another excellent pick because not a lot of people – there have been some mock drafts where he's falling maybe just shortly past 10 because there's going to be such a quarterback run early. But I don't think anyone's going to say that the Bears reached if they took Micah Fitzpatrick at number 8. And obviously the Alabama DB part of it too is a nice feeling, knowing how well coached up they are, and that guys that have come right before Fitzpatrick, whether it's Marlon Humphrey, Clinton Dix, Landon Collins, a lot of them have had a lot of success right out of the gate.
You'd even set up a nice little Alabama duo with Eddie Jackson, so where the Bears have a lot of flexibility there. So concerns about his fit or lack thereof?
Well, I think some might say that he's potentially kind of a similar player as Eddie Jackson. I don't think that you're going to run into a problem with that. I think maybe the bigger concern is that if you think he's only if you think he's only going to be a nickelback in the NFL, then maybe you have a problem if you're taking him with the top 10 pick. I'd like to think he's going to be more of a Tyrann Mathieu type who can do a lot of different things. And I think it's hard to kind of assess a true value on that flexibility. So, no real big concerns for me with Micah Fitzpatrick either. I think it would be a great pick.
I think the next guy is a bit of a reach, but it would be it'd be hard to deny that he doesn't fit the pace profile of as a pass rusher, at least. Marcus Davenport, Arthur. So strengths as to what he brings to the table. I imagine he will be the one that we can poke more holes into. But first, strengths.
Well, his size is extremely rare. You could look at him off the hoof and say that the best case scenario for this dude is he's going to be the next Jadeveon Clowney or even Julius Peppers, which is future Hall of Famer. Yeah, so it's just rare. His wingspan, his explosion for a man of his size, it's all extremely exciting when you just look at traits. And not to say Ryan Pace just looks at traits, but I think that's, if there was one word I would choose to sort of describe Ryan Pace's first round drafting tendencies, that would be it. He looks for traits. So not a lot of players in this entire draft are going to have better ones than Davenport. And I should just add, reach or not, Marcus Davenport was my pick. I've only done one mock draft so far this season. And I did send Davenport to the Bears at number 8. Now, I think ideally maybe you'd love to trade down a few spots, but of course it takes 2 to tango, and all draft fans who are pining for these things tend to forget that, but you do have to find someone else who wants to make a trade too. So, and then there's the small school. We've seen that recently with Pace, last year in particular, that he's not going to shy away from those small school guys. So maybe that lessens some of the concerns about someone coming from Texas San Antonio, a program that's only had one draft pick, period, and has never had a first rounder. I believe David Morgan was a 6th round draft pick of the Vikings a couple years ago.
Knock some holes in Davenport, Arthur.
I don't think when you watch his tape, I'm not sure that the speed really kind of explodes off of it. He ran great at the combine, blew people away. I don't want to say that speed doesn't translate, but it doesn't necessarily like make your jaw drop. I think it's more the combination of his size and speed than anything. But there's going to be a little bit of a projection. I think he played with a hand in the dirt a lot, as well as playing on his feet at UTSA. So some projecting there. That's a word we've used a lot on this podcast here today. I think that just the level of competition, just because Ryan Pace has shown a willingness to go to schools like North Carolina A&T for Tariq Cohen or, Ashland for Adam Shaheen, you don't know for sure that he is ready to play with the big boys and ready to come in and make an immediate impact. So if the Bears are serious about contending this season, maybe Davenport isn't the guy who you would draft at number 8 and realistically think is going to kind of, transform your pass rush overnight, which is what I think the Bears need to have happen, especially after some of the other decisions they've made and letting guys go like Willie Young and Lamar Houston and Pernell McPhee.
Yeah, they're probably 1 or 2 good to solid pass rushers from having a really great D, so that's something that they have to consider. Before we get to the last player, because you kind of just touched on it, what to you and this is again the ideal because you always want to get more picks if possible. Always want to have more shots in this lottery that is the draft essentially. What is the most plausible trade down scenario for the Bears in the first round, moving from number 8 for you? If you can think of it.
Yeah, I mean, I was asked this last night on Twitter. What happens if Saquon Barkley falls to number 8? I don't think it's going to happen, but I think that might be the most plausible trade down scenario, only because, well, I've told you how I feel about first round running backs. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't want Saquon Barkley. I'd rather trade down and try and draft Rashad Penny or someone like that, Ronald Jones, and pick up an extra day 2 pick. So maybe that's the scenario. If in some crazy world he is available, I think it would be too much of a luxury pick, and I don't think the Bears need him. So maybe that's what would happen. Is it's just what I described. Barkley falls, you're able to get back the 3rd rounder you don't have. And if you're bent on drafting a potential game-changing running back, and let me be clear, I don't think the Bears have to, but some people want to see that. So maybe you do get someone like a Rashad Penny. And then the other one, again, is if you could just trade down a few spots and still feel like you could land someone like a Marcus Davenport, maybe even a few more spots and land someone like a Harold Landry, you'd still get a legit round 1 pass rusher, but maybe you're able to get that 3rd rounder back that you gave up in the Trubisky deal last spring.
I swear I'm not doing shameless plugs for the piece I wrote, but Derwin James, Arthur, how does he fit into the Bears defense as a do-it-all safety?
Dude, you wrote the piece for our website. Shameless plug away. I'm thrilled to hear it. Yeah, Rob did a great job with this Swiss Army knife DB piece. Lots of awesome film study. Led off with Derwin James, and I mean, you nailed it. He's was compared by Sean Taylor. Compared to Sean Taylor, excuse me, by one college DB coach. He's a dude who, he's a dude, I think is one way of putting it. He is a culture changer in a lot of ways. The way people talked about Jamal Adams last year, this is a guy who is going to bring toughness into your locker. I'm not saying the Bears necessarily need that, but you bring him in because you're looking for an enforcer. You're looking for someone who is going to bring not only that, intimidation factor, but just unique athleticism and size to the position. So, again, I think Adrian Amos is fine, but I don't think he's ever going to be a blue chipper, and that's what Derwin James looks like he might be able to be. So, yeah, I think you're just – that might be the perfect pairing if you're looking for fit-wise what you'd want to put with Eddie Jackson, someone with that type of size and physicality and speed to put with a ball hawk and a guy who's got some corner cover ability. That might be the perfect type of mix that you're looking for.
Yeah, for me, with him, and the difference between Fitzpatrick is that James is more of an athletic freak. I think James, while his floor might be lower, his ceiling is that much higher. So he's probably more of the traits guy in comparison to the other version of safety, if we're being honest.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
As far as weaknesses and a lack of fit.
Mm-hmm. Well, he wasn't the same player last year as he was a couple seasons ago. Our guy, Greg Gabriel, will be able to kind of attest to this more, but we've talked about it a lot. And he said he thinks maybe Derwin James was kind of protecting himself a little bit last season, or maybe was a little gun shy coming off the injury the year prior. So you're somewhat drafting a player looking at his tape from a couple years ago and just sort of assuming he's going to get back to that level. I don't think there's any reason to think he won't, but he's a little bit further removed from, I think, that consistently dominant play on a down in, down out, and game in, game out basis than maybe some other dudes. And then, I think it's a little bit overblown, but some people would still say that much like drafting a guard in the top 10, doing the same with the safety, it's a little more unusual of an approach. But again, I think the game is changing, and just as you need to defend 3 techniques, you need a guy who can, man up on a tight end in today's NFL. So I have no problem with it at all.
Absolutely. I think you kind of spoiled it. So
I'm good at doing that.
Yeah. So I assume you're sticking with Davenport for the Bears' choice, number 8 overall, come April 27th.
Yeah, for now I am. I had this weird hunch that he's the kind of guy that kind of just makes Ryan Pace stay up at night trying to think of ways that he's going to be able to acquire him. So that's not any insider info. It's just, again, right now a hunch. But I guess for the time being, at least I'll stick to it. I will have another mock draft coming at Pro Football Weekly in about the next 10 days or so. So we'll see if the opinion has changed in that time.
Okay, perfect. I wanted to finish off this podcast because this is a very fervent debate that tears apart Twitter. Jersey aesthetics is always one of the smartest debates you'll see on social media. I'm doing air quotes again. But the Bears are bringing back the orange pumpkin, the orange creamsicle jersey, or the beautiful orange jersey, depending on who you talk to. What are your thoughts on that, Arthur? Because they're bringing back the orange jersey, they are getting rid of, in my opinion, the pristine Monsters of the Midway throwback with the orange numbers. So what do you think of that, Arthur, in this debate?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm actually kind of indifferent, not to cop out, but I don't spend as much time thinking about it, I guess, as others. But when I think of orange, I think of vitamin C. And when I think of vitamin C, I think of health and healing and immunity. And I think that's maybe what these Bears need as much as anything. So I loved what George McCaskey had to say about it too. He kind of he sort of waxed nostalgic when he talked about the reason he's bringing back the orange jerseys. He said it's not quite a throwback, but it is. It kind of is. It's going back to a time when they were kind of the king of the league, if you will. So if that's what they're going for, I don't really have an issue with it. But I kind of like all the Bears uniforms. I agree with you. I like the other old throwback, the nice, crisp, clean look as well. And I think the Bears have some of the better unis. Just their regular jerseys, not the alternate ones, as any in the NFL. So that's part of being a charter organization. You got to look good, and I'm pretty confident the Bears are gonna look good in whatever decision they make. The question is whether the play is going to back it up.
That wasn't a cop-out. That was a very good answer. That was.
I'm a BS artist. What can I say?
We discuss fashion here on WCG Radio. That should just about wrap up this podcast. Arthur, where can listeners find your work?
Hit me up on Twitter at Arthur Arkush. Check us out at profootballweekly.com. We are doing all kinds of great draft coverage. We've got the magazines out on newsstands. The draft newsletter is one of the things we're most excited about right now. I'd encourage your listeners to check it out. Just stay with us. We got Ed Holm doing his awesome top 50 countdown. I've got lots of great freelancers, including Robert, who are making great contributions to the site, and just really excited about this stretch drive leading up to the draft and getting everyone as set as we can at PFW, profootballweekly.com.
4 more weeks of fun. You heard the man. Follow him at Arthur Arkush and follow Pro Football Weekly at PF Weekly. Going to be a great last month of really in-depth draft coverage and analysis. And then follow us on Twitter at WC Gridiron. Follow me on Twitter at Robert Zaglinski. And as always, everybody, stay classy.